Are you curious to learn about the market outlook and sustainability highlights within alternative investments? Come join us in learning from investment experts across the field, all the way from private equity to infrastructure, real estate, and beyond. In this episode, we will talk about private equity investing together with Josh Lernerin. Josh is professor at Harvard Business School and one of the world's leading academics within private equity and investment banking. So to start off, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
I would be glad to. I teach at Harvard Business School, and I've been there for a very long time, but mostly have focused in the area of venture capital and private equity. And of course, during those years, the industry has evolved quite a bit, which has kept me very busy trying to understand the trends and evolution, and then try to do a lot of research looking at many of these questions, often with the help of limited and general partners.
Perfect. And we at Evli are very lucky to have you here in Helsinki and Stockholm, holding a private equity seminar for our institutional clients. And maybe then digging into the topic of private equity. Overall, private equity as an asset class has been performing very well over the past 20 years when looking at returns. But Josh, how do you see the next, say, 20 years? Do we see a similar trend and development, or how do you see this?
Well, you really need a crystal ball to answer that question definitively, but I think that certainly you can argue that the basic value creation of new innovation on the venture side and restructuring and reacting to economic change on the buyout side are unlikely to be things that go away.
Yeah.
That the sort of fundamental drivers of what makes these things work are unlikely to disappear anytime soon. That being said, of course, there is a sense of, this is a great asset class when it's not too popular. So you want to, sort of be a little cautious in periods like, let's say, a couple years ago when you had everyone rushing into the venture market. So it certainly is a case where the fundamentals are there, but the actual details of how it plays out are likely to be a function of many different actions.
Makes sense. And it seems that in the US, the universities and foundations have been already for a long time now having a desire to invest in alternative investments, including private equity. So what would you say are the reasons behind this?
Well, when you think about universities, foundations, and family offices, these are in many senses really long-run investors. So, for instance, Harvard, where I'm at, has been around for almost 4 centuries, and I think we hope will be around 4 centuries from now, assuming that is that humanity is around in 4 centuries. Families are investing not just simply for themselves, but their children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And there is this sort of sense that they are looking for the very long term. Mm-hmm. And as such, there's a lot of appeal for investing in illiquid asset classes because the liquidity is less important to these kind of investors. Yeah. There's also a sense that what the real drivers of performance, the process of transforming companies and developing new technologies, is something that's really fundamental, and as such, should be at the heart of the portfolios that are there. There's, for many of these long-run investors, the speculation and the day-to-day fluctuations of the stock market are much less interesting. They're interested in being, the best investors over a decade or 2 decades, and long-run investments seem to really fit that kind of investing style.
And what would be your advice for Nordic investors then? Should we be taking example from the US? And if so, what should we look at when thinking of investing in private equity?
Well, I think one thing we know about private equity investing is that this is unlikely to be an area where you can jump in with both feet and expect to get a lot of success. That when you look at successful investors, they've taken their time getting into it and really understanding it and carefully reflected and learning lessons about what's happened. And a lot of that's because this is not like, for instance, stocks, where you're pretty much, no matter what you do, likely to get just an average kind of return.
Yeah.
In private equity, we have some managers who are very, very good and others of which are more disappointing. There's a very big dispersion in terms of performance. And being careful in choosing the right managers, in some sense, matters a lot more than exactly when you come into the market. Yeah. So it is an area where patience is really rewarded, as well as understanding how the asset class really works.
Makes sense. And looking at listed equities, it's obviously been a very challenging year this year, while private equity has performed relatively stable. So how do you see the future for private equity? Are we expecting a downturn at some point?
Well, I think that one thing that is clear about private equity really sort of throughout history is that you tend to get what happens in the public markets, but with some degree of lag, right? That just the nature of the accounting traditions and approaches in the industry tends to mean that the kind of very dramatic shocks that happen in the public markets will eventually manifest. I mean, you're holding equity, so equities either are going to go up or go down, and there's going to be a fair amount of correlation between the public and private markets. It's just that one often sees the kind of delays and lags in terms of what's happening. But again, I think the crucial thing to emphasize is that when you invest in private markets, it really is a long-run game, and that you're going to probably go through, over the course of a 10-year life of a fund, a number of ups and a number of downs. And the really crucial thing is really where you start and where you end up.
Yeah. And finally, talking about sustainability in private equity, of course, sustainability and ESG have been high on the agenda of private equity investors. But what would you say are concrete ways for investors to enforce sustainability within their portfolio and portfolio companies?
Yeah, this has clearly been an area where there's been an enormous amount of attention, both in terms of traditional funds who are paying a lot more attention to what is happening within portfolio companies, and then also, of course, the rise of various kinds of impact-related funds. And I think what is clear is that the industry is still at a somewhat young point in terms of really incorporating this. For instance, in terms of trying to measure ESG, we see certainly a number of efforts to try to standardize what's a very confusing mixture of metrics that get used in many different contexts. And even when it comes to creating these measures, then you sort of think about how do you benchmark them for the industry or the period of time and the like. There's certainly not easy answers, but I think that when you look, for instance, at the academic research being done here, I think we have at least a few clues as to how to do this in a better way, and to try to really help the industry try to think through what are some of the consequences of the investments.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Josh, for the valuable insights on private equity. This is all for our part today. However, the show goes on, so don't miss out on the rest of our Alternative Insights videos. So stay tuned. This is Ebli.